Opal RT, and Siemens. So this is a brief of our event, PERA, and we welcome you here and the Opal RT, and we especially thanks to the Opal RT for being a sponsor of this event.
Thank you again.
Yes, yes. So I guess we can start our session in just 1 or 2 minutes. So
Sure.
participants are also joining. Hmm.
I'm actually just waiting for a few more of these participants to join. So let a participant be somewhere around 30, 35. And after that, we will start. Still, we have 2 more minutes. Like it's 9:58 only. Manak. Hello. Manak, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I was just saying that when Satish joins, please do let me know. So if he requires to share his screen, I'll make him a co-host.
Yes, sure. I'll drop you a message.
Sure. I guess we have sufficient numbers, so we can start. Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth day of the Para 21. So I'm Gaurav Kharin. I'll moderate this session along with my colleague, Ms. Chaman. So before we start, as usual, we'll take the questions at the end of the session. So in between, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box. And once our speakers complete the presentation, they will take the question. So without taking much of your time, permit us to begin the session with the third initial talk on the Opal RT by Dr. Manik Jalhotra. So let me introduce to you Mr. Jalhotra. Mr. Jalhotra is a PhD in polytronics and also a recipient of Chhattisgarh Young Scientist Award. He has joined Opal RT in 2020 and currently working as a electrical modeling and a simulation specialist. So on the behalf of whole Para 21 team, I would like to welcome Mr. Jalhotra, and I request Dr. Jalhotra to deliver the initial talk on Opal RT simulators. Over to you, Dr. Jalhotra.
Thank you, Gaurav. I'll share my screen. Just let me know it's visible to you.
Yes, it's visible.
So good morning to all the participants. I am Manik Jalhotra, working as an electrical modeling and simulation specialist in the Axis team at Opal RT Technologies. And the title of the presentation for today is the Opal RT solutions to the challenges in real-time simulation of energy applications. The main agenda which we'll be covering today is the first one. We'll be going into the 3 Ws, and then we'll talk about the various toolboxes which we as a company of real-time simulator provides in the various applications. And as Gaurav has already told you, we'll be having a session for 50 minutes, and last 10 minutes are kept for the queries, so that if anyone has any doubt, they can please feel free to talk about that. Moving on to the real-time simulators, the first thing which we need to really understand is, like before even we talk about real-time simulators and stuff, what are the various toolboxes which we provide? We first need to understand like what exactly is a real-time simulator, where exactly we need to use it, and when exactly do we need to use it. So before we do not know these things, it is like complete incomplete sort of thing. So the first question which we can the first things which we need to understand is like where exactly the real-time simulators can be implemented. And to answer this question, I have taken up a particular setup which has been done in NIT Rourkela, which was for the regulated wind power generation system. So in this particular entire hardware setup, so what they wanted to do is that they wanted to implement a controller for a DFIG system. So as we can see, they had a DC motor, which was replicating the wind turbine. The output of the DC motor was being fed to the DFIG, which was connected to the rotor on the back-to-back converters. They were connected to the rotor end, and we had the stator, which was directly connected to the supply. In this entire setup, the controller of this entire setup, it was made to rest on the Opal RT simulator. As we can see that the currents from the stator wires and the voltages they were being measured, these information were being fed into the Opal RT simulator, where the controller was sitting. It was doing its functionality, and we were getting the PWM pulses, which was being fed to the back-to-back converter. So we see this kind of like answers that when exactly we need to use this thing. So we have like one portion of so if I just go on to this slide, so this was like the actual picture from their lab. We can see that they had their DFIG motors, the back-to-back converters. It was being implemented, and for the participants who are new users to the real-time simulators, this black box in the picture is what we call as a real-time simulator. And we can see that the information of the voltage and the current sensors, they are being taken from these sensor boards which are present on the table. And this information was being fed into the real-time simulator where the controller was sitting, and it was doing its functionality to generate the PWM pulses, which we can see on the DSO. So in such regards, like coming back to the question, like when exactly and where exactly we need to have a real-time simulator. So you understand, like in our this NIT Rourkela case, we have a real plant. We have a DFIG system which actually exists in our lab, but our controller, it is not it is not on a DSP or an FPGA board. As of now, the controller is made to work. The entire C code generation, everything related to that, it is being made to work on the real-time simulators. So this is like one particular case scenario where a real-time simulators can come into picture, because it is the real-time simulators which can do this functionality, which can have the interaction with the real plant. If we go on the offline simulation, say you are working with the we are working with MATLAB, right? So by no means we can have the integration of MATLAB with the real plant. It just does not have that particular sort of capability. This is where the real-time simulators comes into picture. So the answer is, whenever we need to have a real-time simulator, it is a case when you have a real plant with you, and on the other hand, you have something on the simulation. This is not particularly entirely tested. So you want to test the controller. So before developing the controller onto the hardware stage, we need to make sure that whatever the parameters we have defined for our controller, will they work satisfactorily when they are made to integrate with the real plant. So this is where a real-time simulator comes into picture. And you must have also come across a term which we call as RCP, which is called as rapid control prototyping. So users can also ask me, like in this particular case, we have a real plant with us, and the controller, it is on the simulator side. So it could have been like someone could have also asked me, like it is not feasible if, say, someone is working on the power systems. It is not feasible for them or anyone to have a grid in their lab. It is not feasible, but yes, they can make a controller. So the question could have been put to me, like, is the vice versa condition also possible with the real-time simulator? So yes, the answer to that is also yes. An example to this is from the Jadavpur University. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to develop a pressurized heavy water reactor. They wanted to actually develop a controller for the pressurized heavy water reactor. Now having pressurized heavy water reactor in the lab is completely not feasible. So what they did is they had their mathematical modeling of the reactor, which was made to which was made to set or dump on the real-time simulators. Now, this real-time simulator, which behaves as their heavy water reactor, is made to interact with the controller, which is on the embedded target, as we can see. And the information between the embedded target and the real-time simulator can flow through the I/O channels, which are present each product of the real-time simulator. So this is what mostly we might have also come across the term, which we call as hardware in the loop. So hardware in the loop is nothing. It is just a vice versa condition of RCP, where in the hardware in the loop, we have the plant in the simulation world, and we have a controller which is on the which is there in the physical site, which is present in our lab. So this is kind of the cases where the real-time simulators, they actually come into picture. Again, I mean, I have also worked on the simulators during my PhD and even after joining Upalati. So what I have observed is, like any real-time simulator, not talking about just ours, what I feel is like the entire usage of a real-time simulators, it exactly has not been taken advantage of, at least in the Indian academics. Industry-wise, they are doing these RCP and HIL things, but on the academic side, there are very few universities which are actually making use of the simulators as an RCP or for HIL testing. So I believe that after this session, you might be like fully aware, or at least 50% aware. I'll give that an attempt to make sure that what are the various capabilities of the real-time simulator which we provide. So apart from the RCP and HIL testing, the other feature which our real-time simulators can also do is, so let us say that we are working on the communication protocol sides. So we have these hardware RTUs with us. We have these remote terminal units, and the data between these RTUs and the IEDs, they are being transferred to the communication protocol, which is DNP3. So in this particular scenario also, the OpenRT real-time simulator can come into picture. This is also what we support. So let us say that we do not have RT with us. We do not even have an IED with us. But I want to test whether the data which I'm sending through DNP, is it going to be sent properly or not? So the answer to that is yes. Whenever we are working with the OpenRT real-time simulators, the communication protocol configuration is completely feasible, where the real-time simulator can even work as a real-time as a remote terminal unit, and also it can also be made to work as an IED after going from this stage one of implementation. So let us say that now the user has purchased a remote terminal unit. They have a relay unit with them, or they even have an IED with them. So what they can do is they can make the real-time simulator work as an other functionality. Say if they have an RTU, they can make OpenRT to work as an IED 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the DNP3 communication protocol data can be exchanged between the real-time remote terminal unit and the OpenRT simulators, which are now working as an IED. And in the vice versa condition also, the remote terminal unit can be made to work on the real-time simulator, and that real-time simulator can interact with an actual hardware, which is our IEDs, which are present on the physical side. Not only these DNP3, we also support IEC 61850 in a similar way, like the data which actually gets um, uh, where the data we capture from the CT and VT. So this particular data is being sent to the relay unit, and the communication protocol which is followed during this time is the sampled values, which is nothing but IEC 61850. Now, after this information is being transferred from the CT to the relay, relays will send this information depending on whether whatever the control algorithm is running in the relay. They will take a decision, and that particular decision whether to trip the breaker or not, it is going to be sent back to the breaker. So this communication protocols is transferred through the GOOS protocol, which is nothing but IEC 61850, but the different version of it. So DNP3 is IEC 61850, IEEE C37.118, and Modbus protocol. There are various number of communication protocols which we support. So this kinds of end up my first half of, I mean, not the first half, my first point, like where exactly we can have the real-time simulators, and also when exactly we need to have a real-time simulator with us. But what exactly goes in the entire real-time simulation is that it is nothing but it is all about the time steps. Say if you're working in the applications of power electronics, we know that with power electronics, we need to touch high frequencies. Like high frequencies is like really high frequencies in the ranges of hundreds of kilohertz. So if we are trying to implement that hundreds of kilohertz when we are working in the simulation side, normal CPU processors, they will not have the capability to work in that particular range, because we need to actually boil down to the ranges of nanoseconds. So it is like completely not possible with the normal CPU processors. Also, say if you're working with a very large power system network where we have 10,000 plus nodes with us. So in that particular wide area simulation, we are not like that much stressed upon the transient conditions. We are like more of focused on the steady state conditions. So depending on the size and depending on the application which we choose, there are a various number of toolboxes which we provide, so that whatever the functionality we want to test, it can be tested efficiently. There are no overruns. The measurements which the real-time simulators present to the user, they are in fact the actual values. And for all of these things, there are a various number of toolboxes which we provide, and we'll have a bit of a study on all of these toolboxes which are presented. So let us say that as of now, what we are doing is we are working with high switching frequencies. The reason we are now talking in the terms of power electronics, Now, the reason why we go for high switching frequencies, it is very simple. Also, like we can see on the right hand side, the figures which are present to us. So if we have a PWM pulse, which is we are generating at 1 kilohertz, we can see that the load current profile, it has a huge number of ripple. But if again that same PWM, it is made to shift from 1 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz, we can see that the current profile, the waveforms, they become they tend to become very smoothen out. They have a reduced THD. The benefits of high switching frequencies, they are like very much known to us. High power density, low THDs. Uh, these are the various advantages of these things. But coming on to the simulation side, it becomes very challenging for the real-time simulators to work on those high switching frequencies, because we need to go in the ranges which are below 1 microseconds. So the solution to that is what we call as EHS. So EHS, it is called as electrical hardware solver, which is a generic and reprogrammable FPGA-based electrical solver at the heart of EFPGA's at the heart of EFPGA SIM suite. So what it means is that, though I had like initially told you that when we want to work in the ranges of nanoseconds, we cannot like work on the CPU. So the solver which we provide, which is called as EHS, it is the modeling of which is done through a particular type of modeling, which is called as Pejovic type of modeling. Now this EHS is made to sit on the FPGA. Now, as we can see over here, we have our power electronics network, which we want to work in the range of nanoseconds. And this entire network, it is going to made to be sit on the FPGA. Because with FPGA, we can touch those ranges of nanoseconds which we want. So the various simulation toolboxes which we support as of now are the SIM power systems from the Simulink. Apart from that, it is the PSIM, Plex, and the multi-SIM, which support the EHS solver, on which we can achieve high switching frequencies. The various product features of the EHS is that it provides very low latency, starting from the very initial stage, which is the PWM inputs which we provide, to the last stage, which is the analog outputs. Apart from that thing, EHS, it has the capacity to run in real time up to 144 coupled switches. Now there is this one thing, like with each EHS version which we provide, depending on its capability, we have a set of numbers, a number of the states which we can implement, because with the increasing number of size, we need to have a higher version of the EHS, which we'll see in the upcoming slides. And so we need to understand like what exactly is the network on which we want to work, and what is the switching frequency on which we want to work. We need to understand before working on one particular version of any EHS version. We need to understand what exactly is the network we need to have with us. Apart from this thing, since we have been talking about the high PWM frequencies, so what is the range of these things? So as of now, like EHS, it can provide the PWM frequencies up to 200 kilohertz. So this is like the fastest power electronic solver in the industry. But I'd also like to add on this one, that just within a couple of months, the new version of these ones will also come, which are called as timestamp bridge applications. So using that particular toolbox, we can like even touch the PWM frequencies up to the range of 500 kilohertz. So this is like a very high switching frequency which we can work with. Apart from like we have been talking about the power electronics, the topology, say we are working with some DC-DC converters or back-to-back or DC-AC inverters. So it is not just the IGBT or the GTO or the IGBT switches which we can support in the EHS, but apart from this thing, all the block sets which are related to the electrical drive library, they are also supported with the eFPGA SIM toolbox. So the other various motors such as PMSM, IPM, BLDCs, SPMs, switch reluctance machines. So all of these toolboxes, they are also present, and we can work with the PWM frequencies which we have chosen. Say we want to work at say 200 kilohertz, so we can generate that high frequency within the simulator to the EHS solver, and that PWM pulses can be fed to whatever the converter, and then we have the load side of it, which on which we have these motors to us. So these motors, they also get integrated with the entire setup, which starts from the PWM pulses. Those PWM pulses which are now fed to the converters, and then it comes down to the motor side of it. So as I was talking about the various EHS versions, so as of now, if we see, as of now, we support EHS 128. We can also like observe the high trend which it is following. That if the number of states, let us say that the number of states are at 125. So with the EHS 128 and having 125 states with us, we can work in the range of 1 microseconds. If we were to also simulate this entire setup with the normal toolbox, let us say we are not working with the eFPGA, we are just working on the CPU side, and if we want to implement that 125 states on the CPU, there is going to be no, even no thought that we can work in that 1 microsecond range. I believe like with these many states, we might get the functionality at some hundreds of microseconds. So we can see like how efficiently we can have the PWM frequencies getting generated when we are working with these EHS solvers. So as of now, we can see that uh, till now that the number of states which we can support is like around 300 to 350, and we also have a particular information on the time step which we can achieve. Apart from this thing, it is just not these particular parts. What exactly we can also do with the eFPGA sim is that we can also create a customized test scenarios. So what by this what I mean is, so if I take this small network for the consideration, so we have these the diode resistance, switch resistance, we have load resistance and everything. So what we can do is in the Excel sheet, which will be like a template which comes naturally with the EHS. These templates we can play with. So let us say that I want to create an open. So I want to create an open circuit at R1. So this highlighted resistance, I want to create an open circuit. So what I can do is I can just increase the resistance of this R1 to say megas of ohms. So this is going to replicate an open circuit for us. So this is also one feature which we support. These changes like the open circuit, the fault scenarios, whatever we want to study, we can do on the fly. We need not like reload and recompile the model for doing these particular customized test scenarios. And like this is one sort of example where we had like 36 switches, 68 measurements, 20 input sources we had, and a total of 58 LNC components. So with this much high heavy network with us, the range or at which we were able to work was 880 nanoseconds. We can see the power of the eFPGA tool, that how much we can like work in the range of nanoseconds. Apart from this thing, that initially I had told that we can work on EHS with the various toolboxes which are from the different vendors out there. But OpenRT also brings to us its own modeling simulation. So the schematic editor, it goes by the name as schematic editor only. So this is an OpenRT's editor, which is an intuitive user interface for building power electronics, and it is a part of an EHS. So again, completely user friendly it is, and if like we need not have the license of these ones. I mean, like whenever we are working with the other toolboxes, so they tend to come with the license and stuff. This is also one feasible solution where EHS, which is a part of OpenRT, can be very well integrated with the schematic editor given by us. The workflow, it still remains the same. It is not like when we are working with the EHS or the FPGA, do we need to go for the FPGA programming since we are talking about the FPGA? So the answer to that is no. We need not actually indulge in the FPGA programming. So all we need to do is we just need to segregate our models. What we need to do is, if we have a slow part, by slow part, like we can say we have a controller which is working in the range of 50 microseconds. So what we can do is we can make that particular controller execute on the CPU model, which will run in the range of microseconds. And we have a power converter with this, which we want to work at a high switching frequencies. So what we'll do is we'll execute that particular power converter model on the FPGA. So the workflow, it is very simple and it still remains the same. And again, if we have a real controller with us, we can also go for the HIL testing as well. Completely up to the user if they want to do the HIL simulations, and if they do not want, we can also like skip the last stage of it. So if we are skipping that last stage, since the real controller was like present physically outside, and if we are like not working on this one, so what we need to do is we just need to have the controller on the real-time simulators, because the controller needs to be like present to behave to work properly. Now, if we see that if I come down to the entire picture of it, so on the green colored side, we have these wind integrations, PV integrations, electrical storage. So all of these things which need to work at a range of high switching frequencies, we can make it to work on the EHS. And then if we want to work on the power plants and the transmission side, because these are the networks which tend to become very big, like hundreds and thousands of nodes. One can ask, like, is there a solution to work on that particular thing? So yes, because we need to work on the real-time simulators. So one can also ask, like, why is there a toolbox for every particular application? Can we not just directly work on one particular, like say, real-time simulator, make the entire code dump on the CPU and just get it work? The answer is no, because it is all about the time steps. Because when we are working with the power plants and the power system and all the buses and nodes, those systems, they tend to become so huge that we need to have some capability. We need to divide that entire structure in such a way so that we can respect the time step at which we want our network to. So on the power plant and the transmission side, there are various toolboxes which we support. And one of those toolboxes is called as Artemis, which we'll discuss in a bit. But before that, just wanted to give one small description on the PWM accuracy. Because like whenever we are working with the MATLAB, we actually tend to lose on the accuracy of the PWM pulses which we are generating. And at times we are also not aware about these things. So let us say if I have a 0.5 constant, we can see in the picture over here. So I have a constant with me, and I'm comparing this particular 0.5 magnitude constant with the repeating sequence. And these black dotted lines are the time steps which we have chosen. So on the Simulink side, if we see the very first moment, we have 0.5 to be greater than the repeating sequence. So that is why we have a logic 1. But at the second time step, what we have is that now the 0.5 has become lesser than the repeating sequence. That is why the logic 1 has gone down to logic 0. But if we like clearly see that whatever is happening in between two time steps, the Simulink is not able to capture that particular state, right? So this is where the toolbox which we provide, which is called as RT events, it is able to handle that particular feature without without decreasing the time step. Like one can also say that, okay, that I know that say that as of now, my time step which I have given in Simulink is let us say that it is 10 microseconds, and I know that I observed that at 10 microseconds I'm losing the accuracy on the Simulink side. So one can say that, okay, instead of 10 microseconds, what I can do is I can go at 1 microsecond. So I might increase the accuracy, but again with 1 microsecond we are like overburdening the computation capabilities. But when we are working with the RT events toolbox, we will be working at the same time step only. We are not going to decrease the time step. but it is the inherent capability of the RT events, which is going to like uh, compute, which is going to compute the transitions between the two time steps, and the number of events which the RT events can capture, it is up to 255. So RT events is efficient to generate PWMs that have the transitions within one time step. That is up to 255 events. So by this, what I mean is like within one time step, if we are making use of RT events, I have the capability to capture a total of 255 events. So we see like without overburdening the computation, we are having better accuracy, and by better accuracy, I can definitely say that I have an improved power of 255 times more accurate results than I get from the simulation set. So this is the beauty of the RT events when we work, that we tend to have a high accuracy of the PWM pulses, which we can work with. Now, coming on to the power system side, since we have been talking about the power electronics, power system networks, they tend to become very big. All the people who have worked on a power system side, they understand like whenever they go for the simulation, their simulation takes days to simulate. So the reason behind, like one of the reason behind this one is like, let us say that I'm working on the sim power systems approach. So what is there in the SPS is that SPS, it solves the electrical system using the state space approach. So let us say that we have this very simple network where I have two switches with us. So because we have two switches, so this means 2 raised to the power n, that is 2 raised to the power 2. I have 4 sets of state space equations. So whenever a switch changes its state in the MATLAB when we are doing the simulation, SPS is going to recalculate the entire state space and then give us the answer. So with this, it kind of like takes more time. So let us say that my real-time limit, that I am working with the system on which I understood that my real-time limit is say 10 microseconds. So this black dotted line, it represents a 10 microseconds. And what actually is being done is we have these red lines which represents the solution, like when we are working with the MATLAB, the SPS approach of it. So whenever a switch changes its state, so it goes from on to off or off to on, MATLAB is going to recalculate the entire state space. So depending on the complexity of the model, it is going to like take more time to like calculate the new parameters. So at times what it will do is the real time limit, that 10 microsecond, it will be breached. Your network, it might now want 20 microseconds to actually evaluate the data. So, but that is not possible. I mean, possible in the sense it is like going to breach the limit which we have set. This is like one of the feature. I mean, this is one of the reason when like whenever we are working with sim power systems, that why at times it take more time than the other approaches. Apart from this thing, we have the stability issues also with the SPS approach. As we can see, like if we make a transition, if the switch goes from on to off or off to on, in this particular scenario, it is going from on to off. We can see at the moment of the transition, we have a huge spike on the load voltage profile. So this is like the stability issue. The solver, say if you're working with the Tustin solvers, they're marginally stable and they're oscillations. Apart from the stability, if we come down to the accuracy of the solver, SPS, it uses a solver of order 2. We can see with a solver of order 2, we are like kind of losing on the accuracy as well. Now, the solution to all of these challenges which we provide, it is called as Artemis. So what Artemis, the solution, what it does is it is like very kind of similar, because obviously if there are like 4 sets of state space equations which we need to evaluate, so what Artemis will do is before actually executing the simulation, it is going to store all the 4 state space equations into its cache memory. And now whenever the transition happens, now we see whenever there is a change of topology, a switch changes its status, it is not going to take that much time, which SPS would have taken, because it is now like we need to just extract the data from the cache memory. We need not actually re-evaluate the entire network. So with Artemis, we have this capability that we can work well under the range of the real-time limit which we have set. Apart from this thing, The stability with the Artemis solver, it is also very much more stable than the SPS approach. And we can see with the same network, if now we make the switch from on to off, now the transition it is like very less as compared to the SPS approach. Also, as we have seen in the SPS one, that SPS used a solver of order 2, but with Artemis we have an order 5 solver. We can see that the Artemis also like gives a higher accuracy when compared with the SPS one. And also like we can see in this particular example, so this blue colored, let us say this red color one, which is most accurate. So I have this red colored sine wave with us. So this is the Tustin solver which we are using, and it is made to work at 10 microseconds. Now with 10 microseconds, let us say the computation burden is too much, and now I want to work at 100 microseconds. Now you see, if I'm using Artemis at 100 microseconds, and also I'm using the Tustin at 100 microseconds, we can see that this blue B marked reference, the output which I'm getting, it is like far better than the G1. We can see there is a phase shift also, and the magnitudes are also a bit different than the one which I've got through the Artemis solver. So in a nutshell, I can say that the Artemis solvers, it is like way more precise than the Tustin solver if they're working at same time. So what exactly actually is being done is like in Artemis. So this is like one example from the hydrocubic network. So we can see that the network is too big to simulate. So I mean, in every real-time simulator, especially ours, so we have these CPUs which have multiple cores. So multiple cores, what it does is it gives us the capability to divide our network and run all those parallel networks together, so that the entire burden gets reduced, and we can make use of that entire different cores which are present. So what it does is, so if we have a very big network on the transmission side, because we know that the transmission line, it delays, the delay in the transmission line, it allows the transmission system to run in real time. What it means is, because the network is too big and we have these transmission lines, so in practice, the data, it will take some time to transfer from one point A to point B. So this particular inherent capability, we make use of this one while developing the Artemis. So what we do is, at the transmission, so wherever we have the transmission lines, we divide our network. So let us say I have a part A on the left hand side, and I have a part B on the right hand side. Both of these parts A and B, they are connected together with a transmission line. Now what I can do is, I can divide my network as a part A and part B, and I can make them work on the different cores which are present on the CPU. Obviously, we're working on this. We're working parallelly. So the real-time limit which we have set, it is going to be followed. We are not going to violate it. So this is like how we divide that entire network to the transmission lines which are present with us. But the power system people, they could have said that like whenever we are working with the distribution network, we do not have the transmission lines. So how, if I say I have a distribution system network, which is again very big, but I do not have any transmission line. So at that particular stage, how are you going to divide the circuit so that I can make it work on the different cores which are present on the CPU? So this is where the other approach, if we see, it is Artemis SSN. So this is where the other approach comes into picture. So SSN is your state space nodal. So what it does is, so if we see on the left hand side, we have a number of nodes present with us, right? If we do not do any sort of manual node identification, we can see on the left hand side for this particular network, we have 10 nodes, and these 10 nodes create 16 partitions, right? But now when I make use of the SSN, the user can define like where exactly he wants to put that pod. So what that particular node will do is, it will divide the circuit into two halves. Now we can see on the right hand side, we can see that when we are making use of the SSN approach, we have one node, and this one node has created two partitions, and these two partitions can now work on the different cores, which can give us the parallel computation capability. This is the beauty of the SSN. It is the same thing which I have been telling about. We have made it on the different networks, and these ones they will be now running on the different cores which are present on the CPU. This was like this Artemis and SSN approach. It was still like working when we were. It still worked when we were working with some small network. I mean, some hundreds of nodes and something. But let us say that I'm not even working in the range of hundreds of nodes. I'm working in the range of 10,000 nodes plus, 100,000 nodes plus. So in that particular scenario, I am not like focused on the transient conditions. I am more focused on the steady state conditions. So coming down to this one, like if the solution for this particular scenario when we're working with huge network, the solution which we provide at that time is called as ePhasor sim. So ePhasor sim, it is the real-time transient stability simulator which we can work on the large-scale power system, transmission, distribution, and generation whenever we have all of these things in our model. And the various features it can support is that it can go with the positive sequence, the three-phase balanced and unbalanced systems, and the timestamp it can go is in the range of few milliseconds. So the various other highlighted features when we are working with ePhasor sim, these features they are not like uh, uh, these features are not available when we are working with the Artemis, because the solver, the computation process, however it is being done in the background, is different for ePhasor sim when compared to the Artemis. The main highlighted features when we are working with ePhasor sim is that we can work with a huge network of like 100,000 plus nodes, and the other features we can see is that we can import the entire network from the various sources. Apart from this thing, if a user has made some user defined models also, so that can also be imported using the ePhasor sim feature. Communication protocols we have already seen that there is a wide range of communications protocols which we support. This gives us a brief picture of the protocols which we support. It is TCP/IP, IEEE, DNP, IEC 61850, and others. And then apart from this thing, there is this communication network emulation tool. What exactly does this thing is like? As of now, we can see that ePhasor sim it is like compatible with the communication network. But what exactly is this communication network emulation toolbox? We'll see when we talk about the cybersecurity. And the various specifications, though we have seen most of it, we can see that the various modeling environments which are compatible with ePhasor sim, they are the Simulink, Excel, ETAP, PSSC, Sign, Power Factory, Open Modelica, and Dymola. There is a huge list of modeling environments which are compatible with ePhasor sim. And the maximum tested real network size which has been tested is 108,000 single phase nodes. We see how big of a network it can be simulated on this ePhasor sim domain, right? And if we are talking in terms of buses, so the biggest actual client case so far for us is where the client has used 30,000 buses for their network. So we can see how big of a network can be like evaluated on the ePhasor. Moving down from the ePhasor sim to the cyber security. So I mean, with today's electric power grids, though like they're getting the benefits from the new intelligent devices which are out there present, like these intelligent electronic devices, IEDs, and all other. So though these are like good in one way, but the cons of them are like they make the power grid vulnerable to sophisticated cyber attacks. There is various attacks like denial of service, man in the middle, and so many others. We need to also make sure like the power networks, the power systems, they are like completely. We need to work on that one, and they are like fail proof also. So in that particular thing, we can see over here for that particular solution, what OpenRT has done is, so OpenRT is like it is working in the range in the applications of electronics, electrical, automotives, aerospace. From the communication side, we have like collaborated with the network simulator company, which is known by the name of Scalable. So what we can do is one side, if we see over here we have this power OpenRT simulator, which is going to behave as your power grid, right? Now you have your network simulator present with us. Present with you, which is the Scalable name. The company's name is Scalable, and you can have the communication network simulated on the Scalable software, and the integration of these two. By the integration of these two, you can go for the further research in the cybersecurity area. So, like the various applications, the various attacks of cyber can be like denial of service. So it is like one thing where the denial of service can render a vital service unavailable, direct or indirect attack. So we can see we have these hackers and they are like cutting down the service. So apart from these things, the other issues, the other attacks can be man in the middle. What man in the middle does is it is like going to cut down the network between your source to load, and it is going to send some random data onto the loads or onto the these control center sites. So this is also one sort of a cyber attack. Apart from this thing, the GNSS spoofing and beaconing. So this is one also one case study which one can do with. Apart from everything, apart from all the things which you have studied, like automotive domains, they are also like coming. There is a whole lot of research going on to the automotive design. So what exactly is being done is like if I say that if I'm working in the automotive designs, so there are various number of softwares which are supported in the automotive domain, which are like Altia Design, Canoe Vector, TestInView, Clamazine. So RT Lab, it is till us if we have focused on the power electronics, power systems, all those sort of stuffs. Automotive. So how do we support all of these softwares which are present, like which are from the from the automotive domain? So this capability to take the data from these many softwares, Canoe Vector, TestInView. So this is like we have an interface software which we call as RT Lab Orchestra. So what it is going to do is it is going to take the data from these other softwares which are present on the automotive domain. It is going to take the data from them, and Orchestra is going to transfer the data to the RT Lab. So through the use of RT Lab Orchestra, we have the capability to work even in the range in the domain of automotive also. The other solutions which we provide, since time was very limited, we can also go through the official website link of OpenRT. We can work in the domain of aerospace, automotives, power systems. Within the power system, we have cybersecurity, digital twins, microgrid, MMCs. And on the power electronics, we can go with the hybrid electrical transportation. Simulations, we can go with HIL, RCP, software in the loop, and PHIL. And apart from this thing, the various products and services which we provide, I have taken a list of these ones. I have tried to touch most of the software toolboxes which we provide, Artemis, EHS, ePhaser Sim, Orchestra. And if we need to go for the test view, test automation, and we need to like go for the data processing also. These are the other software toolbox which are present at our help, which we can make use of under various circumstances. So this is like the test view and the scope view feature which we provide. This is the official website link which is there. And yes, thank you. Anytime you want to contact me, this is my mail ID, manik.jalotra@opelrt.com. So if you are already a user of OpenRT, for any technical queries, you can always go to the technical support link which I have provided over here, and you can like resource people are already there, and they can instantly work on your case and get it resolved as soon as possible. Thank you, and I guess over to the questionnaire rounds if there are any.
Thank you, sir. That was really a value-adding talk. I am Chaman Lal from Para team. I believe everyone has enjoyed this amazing presentation. Now it is question answer session. We have some questions which were sent during the session. So, first question is, I have Opel RT 5600. How I can know in this Opel RT if EFP efficiency present or not?
Okay, so for this one, like what you can do is you can open the software, the RTLab software. Under the RTLab software, you go to the license. Wherever you upload your license, you click on the license, and whatever toolboxes you have with you, a list of these things will be present. So EFPG, it is a toolbox, so you will not find anything related to EFPG SIM. But under the EFPG SIM, we have EHS. So there will be more information on that one. You will have EHS 128 and the number of cores you support. So you can get it from there. But if in case, for whatever reasons, let us say that you're working with a demo license. For some reasons, your permanent license is supposed to come to you. There might be an update from your side. So you can also get this particular information from the support team that I need to know what are the toolboxes which we support in our license. And contact us also. And
Thank you,
then,
sir.
yes.
One question from Viresh Patel. Is it possible to simulate the multiple model power system and share data between them?
Yes. That is a multiple model power system. Okay. But I believe the person is talking is that. But if can Viresh unmute himself and explain like what do you mean by multiple model? Like, are you going to like simulate them at a different time? Is it going to work like that?
I want to simulate at the same time, and there are different systems, and I want to share the data between them in sync.
Okay, so if I understood your question, you say, let us say that you have one model which is there in one file, and then there is some other part which is there in the other file, and so are they're going to obviously run together, right? They need the information from one file to another.
Yes,
I think yes, it is possible. As long as we can do it on the offline side, we can definitely do on the real-time side also.
Which tool I can use for that? Can I know?
Sorry?
Yeah, for, which tool we can use for the data transfer?
Same thing. You need to understand what is your application. Working on power electronics, need to go on high frequency, go with EHS. Working on the power systems, loads are too much, go for the E-phases instead. It is up to you to decide what is your like application. Solution will be given by us.
Thank you, sir.
I can read the questions also so that participants will know. So for new user,
Yes.
if he or she knows MATLAB Simulink, would it be helpful to learn OpenRT? I would not say that it will be helpful to learn OpenRT because the stuff which we work on the real-time simulators, they are not related to the MATLAB. It will not, but yes, it is going to be an extra advantage because as long as your model is error-free, the chances of it working on the real time will be good enough. But if you do not even know MATLAB, then obviously you need to spend time to develop the model on the MATLAB, and then you need to come on the real time side. So it is, yes, it is best if you know these tools, and then you come down to the OpenRT to work in the real time side. And then can we only simulate the communication layer attacks or on other layers too? Can we simulate the communication other layers? What are the other layers we are talking about?
Hi, Manak. So
Yes.
I was just trying to ask if it's a communication layer or the physical layer or the cyber layer. I mean, if I'm creating a cyber layer attack and observing its impact on the physical layer, and the same way, if rather than the communication layer, I'm just trying to create an attack on some other layers.
So what other layer?
Like I'll be creating a IP masking attack. So that comes, I guess, under the cyber layer.
That comes under the, sorry, what?
The cyber layer.
Cyber layer.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
basically, instead of getting measurements from some particular devices like the PMU, instead of that PMU, I'll be getting it from some other virtual PMU.
Virtually,
So-
you mean like that PMU is in the simulator?
Correct.
Yes, obviously, because you have when we are working with the Opal RT and the scalable, so those attacks which I had been talking about, they are like predefined. But if there is something like if you need to go for some customized attack, I believe it is the capability which we can do.
Okay. Thank you.
On what the time step 7 microsecond is depend on like system size. Okay. So for if like we are not aware of what exactly is the time step on which we want to work, one thumb up rule we can say is like whatever the highest switching frequency we are working with, Nyquist criteria we have all read. So in order to get the answers back, we need to at least have 2 times the highest switching frequency. So that is going to define the time step. But that is not going to like give us the right answers, because 2 times the time step, say if we are working with sine wave, if I take just 2 samples, it is not going to give me a sine wave. It is going to come as a triangular wave only. So as a rule of thumb, we can say that choose the time step which is like 10 times low than the highest switching frequency which we have chosen. Say we are working in 10 kilohertz, right? For 10 kilohertz, you go to 100 kilohertz and then you get your time step. This is going to define the time step if like you don't have any proper estimate of the time step on which you want. Because at times, let us say you have a network, you want to study the harmonics, the subharmonics, and you want to study the subharmonics impact on the power grid. Let us say you have this electric vehicle infrastructure, and when you are charging say 100 or 200 charging stations, so how much will be the impact on the power systems, and you want to study that particular range. At that time, you already know that I want to study 200 kilohertz subharmonics also. So this can give you a rough idea, not a rough idea, this can give you a clear idea on what is the time step you want to choose. But if you do not have an estimate of that, then you can give the time step as I have to. That you can do. Apart from this thing, like whenever we're working with EHS, though you have talked about Artemis, but I can tell you on the EHS side also. So what EHS does is it has the option you what EHS is, it is just a black box. What we need to do is we just need to put in the entire network which we want to simulate on the high switching frequency. So it will automatically decide that what is the minimum time, what is the time step which you can work with. Say it gives you the time step at 250 nanoseconds, and EHS can support up to 200 nanoseconds. So what you can do is you can choose, say if you want, you can choose to work at 200 nanoseconds, but since EHS has already computed the data for you, which is 250 nanoseconds, so you can work at that particular time step. So it kind of gives you an idea. On the RTMS side, it is not going to give you the data. But then if it is not going to give you the data, and if you just put the time step as say 10 times the more as I have told you, you also have a means to understand whether that particular time step will be sufficient for you to work with or not. So whenever you are going to work with the real-time simulators, whenever you are going to work your system, your network, whenever you are going to build your network, say you have given the time step as 1 microsecond. So there is a parameter which you can always observe. It is called as overruns. So if your entire network is working without any overrun, that will tell you that 1 microsecond was sufficient for your network to simulate. But let us say that you are simulating, you get hundreds and thousands of overruns. So what it is trying to say is that 1 microsecond is not sufficiently capable enough to evaluate that entire network. So you need to readjust the time step on that. Yes, these are all the questions from the participants. If there are other questions, you can please unmute yourself and can ask me. Or otherwise, you have the mail ID. You can contact me or the support team at any given time. We'll be happy to help.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for answering these questions. Thank you, sir. Now, we would like to present a virtual memento to you to appreciate your support and value-adding talk.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With your permission, I would like to close this session. And for participants, we have an expert lecture titled "What is the effect of solar integration in the high penetration of solar challenges in UK and India?" Scheduled today from 5 p.m. by Dr. Statis. So on the behalf of whole Para team, I would like to thank you for all joining us today. And have a nice day. Thank you.